John Kennedy buys a sick bull out of compassion, unaware that it hides a surprising secret. The late afternoon sun hung low over the Louisiana countryside, painting the fields in hues of gold and amber, as John Kennedy steered his truck along a winding back road. The air was thick with the scent of cut grass and distant rain, a welcome change from the sterile hum of Senate chambers and the endless buzz of Washington. He'd come out here to escape, to find a moment of quiet, where the weight of legislation and public scrutiny couldn't follow. His only plan was to drive, to let the open land and the hum of cicadas clear his mind. But as he passed a weathered sign pointing to a small cattle ranch, something stirred a pull he couldn't name, like a whisper from the past. He slowed his hands tightening on the wheel and turned down the dusty path, unaware that this impulsive detour would mark the beginning of something extraordinary. The ranch came into view modest and worn, its fences sagging under the weight of time. A few cows dotted the sparse pasture, their heads bowed to the grass, while an old red barn stood at the edge, its paint flaking like autumn leaves. Kennedy parked near a rusted gate, stepping out into the warm, heavy air. His boots crunched on gravel as he scanned the place, taking in the quiet pride of a working ranch, even one past its prime. An older man emerged from the barn, his face etched with lines carved by sun and hard years. He wiped his hands on a faded rag, eyeing Kennedy with a mix of curiosity and caution. "Afternoon," the man said, tipping a sweat-stained hat. "I'm Henry. You looking for something or just lost?" Kennedy offered a small, easy smile. "Just passing through, thought I'd take a look." "Got anything worth showing?" Henry's laugh was dry, tinged with resignation. "Most of my stock's decent, but nothing fancy. There's one, though. He's a different kind of story." He nodded toward the barn, his expression shifting to something softer, almost mournful, and led the way. Inside the barn was dim, the air thick with the musty warmth of hay, and a sharper, unsettling smell that made Kennedy's chest tighten. Henry guided him to a corner stall where a black bull lay sprawled on a bed of fresh straw. The animal was massive, its frame still imposing despite the ravages of illness. Its coat, once sleek, was dull and patchy, its ribs stark against its hide. Each breath came slow, labored, a faint wheeze, cutting through the silence. But it was the bull's eyes that stopped Kennedy, cold, dark, deep, and holding a quiet dignity that seemed to demand respect. The animal's head rested heavily, but as Kennedy stepped closer, it lifted slightly, meeting his gaze with an intensity that felt almost personal. "This is Faith," Henry said, his voice low, reverent. "Named him when he was a calf, thought it'd bring him luck. Seems I got that wrong." Kennedy crouched, his eyes locked on the bull. "What's wrong with him?" he asked, his tone steady but softer than usual. Henry leaned against the stall, his hat in his hands. "Fever's been burning through him for weeks. Vet says it's an infection gone too deep. He don't eat, barely drinks. Maybe a week left if he's lucky. I was planning to put him down tomorrow. Kinder that way." Kennedy didn't answer right away. He studied Faith, the slow rise and fall of the bull's chest, the faint tremor in its limbs. Something about the animal hit him hard, stirring memories he hadn't touched in years. His father's tales of their family's old farm, the way his grandfather used to say, every creature deserved a chance to fight its battles. Kennedy had seen struggle before in the faces of constituents, in the quiet grief of friends, but this bull, broken and defiant in a forgotten stall, was different. It wasn't just pity. It was a call, a need to act that he couldn't ignore. "How much for him?" he asked, standing, his voice firm with a resolve that surprised even him. Henry blinked, his brow furrowing. "You're joking, right, Senator? This bull's done for. Ain't right to take your money for a dying animal." Kennedy's gaze didn't waver. I'm not asking if it's right. I'm asking how much. Henry hesitated, clearly thrown, then muttered, 200, I guess. More than he's worth now. Kennedy reached for his wallet, pulling out 600 in crisp bills and pressing them into Henry's hand. Get him ready. I'll have a truck here in a few hours. Henry shook his head, mumbling about stubborn city folks. But Kennedy was already on his phone calling Clara, his longtime friend and ranch manager. I need a stall set up at my place, he said, his tone clipped but certain. And get Dr. Ellis, the vet from Baton Rouge. I'm bringing home a bull. Clara's voice crackled with disbelief. A bull, John? You don't know a thing about cattle. What's this about? He glanced at Faith, whose eyes still held his unyielding despite the pain. It's about doing what's right, he said simply. Just make it happen. Clara sighed but agreed, and Kennedy pocketed his phone, turning back to Henry. Why Faith? He asked, the name lingering in his mind. Henry shrugged, a faint smile breaking through. My granddaughter chose it. Said he looked like he believed in something even as a wobbly calf. Kids see things we don't. Kennedy nodded, the name settling into him like a vow. Faith. It fit somehow like a promise he was making to himself and the animal. While waiting for the transport truck, Kennedy wandered the ranch's edge, his boots sinking into the soft, loamy soil. The sky had deepened to a fiery orange, the kind of sunset that made Louisiana feel like a world apart. He thought about his life decades in politics, the compromises, the victories that never felt as clean as he'd hoped. He'd fought for people, for principles, but this was different. This was about one life, one chance, a fight most would have walked away from. He knew Faith might not survive, that the odds were stacked against them, but he'd learned long ago that the battles worth fighting were the ones others called lost. Back at the barn, Henry was securing a halter on Faith the bull, too weak to protest. You sure about this? Henry asked, his eyes searching Kennedy's face. This ain't gonna be easy. Kennedy met his gaze unflinching. Nothing worth it ever is, he said. I'm not backing down. The transport truck rolled in as dusk settled, its headlights slicing through the growing dark. 2 ranch hands sent by Clara worked with Henry to load Faith into a padded trailer, the bull sedated for the journey. Kennedy watched every move, his hands clenched, as if his determination could keep the animal alive. The drive to his property, a sprawling retreat he'd bought years ago for moments like these, was silent. He didn't touch the radio, didn't check his messages. His mind was with Faith, with the way the bull's gaze had held his, like they'd struck an unspoken deal. When he arrived, Clara was waiting. Her arms crossed, her expression a mix of irritation and concern. You've lost it. You know that, she said, leading him to the barn where a clean stall waited. This better not be some kind of stunt. Kennedy's lips twitched. If it is, it's a damn expensive one, he said, but his eyes were on the trailer where Faith was being unloaded. Dr. Ellis arrived soon after, a lean man with a brisk, no-nonsense air. He examined Faith, his hands quick and precise, checking the bull's pulse, eyes, and temperature. Septicemia, most likely, he said, stepping back. Infection's gone systemic. I can start antibiotics and fluids, but his chances are slim, 10%, maybe less. Kennedy's face was unreadable. Then we work with the 10%, he said. Whatever he needs, meds, equipment, anything. Give him a shot. Ellis studied him, then nodded. All right, Senator. I'll set him up, but don't expect miracles. Kennedy didn't respond, watching as Ellis and Clara rigged an IV line, settling Faith onto a thick bed of straw. The bull's breathing was ragged, but there was a stubborn spark in its eyes, a refusal to surrender, that Kennedy recognized. He'd seen it in himself, in the fights he'd taken on when others had given up. By midnight, the barn was still lit only by a single bulb that cast long shadows across the dirt floor. Clara tried to coax Kennedy to the house, but he shook his head. "I'm staying," he said, dragging a stool near the stall. Clara muttered something about stubborn fools, but left him be, her footsteps fading into the night. Kennedy sat his elbows on his knees, watching Faith. The bull's eyes flickered open, meeting his, and Kennedy felt a strange calm settle over him. "You're a fighter," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "So am I. Let's see this through." He didn't know why he was talking to a dying bull, but it felt right, like a pact sealed in the quiet. As the hours passed, the moon rose, spilling silver through the barn's windows, and Kennedy stayed his resolve as steady as the bull's faint breaths, knowing this was only the beginning. The barn had become John Kennedy's sanctuary,